Hi, welcome to the podcast Ease into Clarity. I'm Dr. Divi, family doctor turned intuitive coach, and I'm here to help you. In this podcast, we will learn mental techniques, emotional techniques, and spiritual techniques to change daily problems. So maybe it's your husband, your boss, your coworker, your kids, they're driving you crazy. You can email me any of your questions and I will use all the techniques I've learned over the years and help you. Grab your hot chocolate and make sure to subscribe. We'll see you soon. Ciao. Hi, it's Dr. Divi from the podcast Ease into Clarity. Thank you for joining me. If you ever want to attend my podcast live and get some one-on coaching and help others, please email me at easeintoclarity@gmail.com, and then we'll get you on the podcast live so we can chat, help you, and coach you. So let's begin. Today, we're going to be talking about extension versus projection. These are some words that come from A Course in Miracles, and they're very easy to understand, but sometimes projection takes longer for the human mind to understand. Most people understand extension, especially if you're to any degree of spiritual work. Extension is easy. Projection is a bit harder, but I'm going to explain them in terms of lots of different concepts, and I guarantee you might need to return to this video a few times because I know personally it took me years to understand projection because essentially the ego doesn't want to be found. But I'm going to try to hopefully make it as simple as I can. So if you could see me, which I know if you're listening to the podcast, you might not be able to see me. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see me. There's a part of us that's an infinite spirit. And if you're seeing me right now, you would see my hand being held up vertically. There's a part of us that's in spirit all the time. And there's a part of us that can look at everything that's going on in the world through the eyes of love. And what's defined by the word extension is to walk around all day, every day, seeing everybody as spirit. Everybody is a child of God. Everybody is that divine I am. An extension is essentially us in our love, giving our love to them from the divine to their divine. So I walk into my house, rather than seeing my husband who didn't take out the garbage, which is never true, he always takes the garbage out, but let's just make this up. My husband who didn't take out the garbage. So in the moment I see it that way, I'm becoming the critical, judgmental version, and I'm seeing him as the incapable version. That is the ego's. But if I walk into the house in my divine light, seeing my husband in his divine light, then I am more likely to send what's called extension. I see his capability. I see his power. I see his potential. I see his I am. If I do that repeatedly over and over and over again, I am training a muscle into extension. I'm training myself to see him in the version of the divine I am. I'm training myself to see him through the eyes of love. That is extension. Now, another principle is to understand that it says in A Course in Miracles, and I'm going to quote this, the ego always speaks first. So if I walk into the house and I see and if I'm not mindful, I see the garbage still sitting there, then the ego is going to respond instantly. You didn't do this, da, 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 da. But if I'm doing my spiritual work and I still see that response coming out of my mouth, oh, you didn't take the garbage out. And rather than saying it, or even if I do say it, if I can catch myself, or even if I do say it, if I can kind of go, oh, babe, I'm sorry, I was seeing you through the lens of judgment or not enough. Babe, the truth is you are my divine consort and I want to see you through the eyes of source. And it takes practice. And the more we're willing to do that, the more we're in extension from my hand of the divine I am to his hand of his divine I am. But remember, the ego is very much connected to our nervous system, and it's going to respond first. And this applies to all relationships, your husbands, your coworkers, your bosses, your kids, all of it. And what we typically do, remember I said the ego always responds first. Essentially, if we're not in extension, then we're in projection. I'm going to say it 10 more times. If I'm not in extension, I'm in projection because one of them have to respond. Now, projection, as all of us, or most of us have heard that term before, We all use it all day, every day. He's projecting on me. This is projecting on me. We use it all the time. But what projection is my unhealed stuff going around and looking at the world for their unhealed stuff. And I go look at the world and I look at it through my wounds. Now, the only thing that's going to trigger me is my own wounds. We've heard that expression. If you're pointing your finger out that way, there's 3 fingers pointing back at you. You're only triggered by that which is in you, right? If I'm activated, it's in me. So anytime I'm activated, my nervous system is activated. Then I have to pause and go, what in this other person is activating me? And the only reason projection is hard is only because it's really hard to see our own stuff. We don't want to. That's why people take classes and workshops and groups, because in a safe container of a class, you're more likely to say in your mind to somebody in class, oh, you're driving me crazy. But you can see it in your own mind, but you know that's kind of weird because you're in a class that you paid for. And what's this all about? And your nervous system might respond in class, but then you can work through it because it's a safe place. But in your relationship with your husband, they don't take the garbage out. It's going to drive you crazy and you can project all day. Now you're asking me, what am I projecting, Divi? He actually didn't take the garbage out. Divi, he didn't take the garbage out. Dr. Divi, he didn't take the garbage out. What I want you to be open to is you're projecting onto him your judgmental stuff, you're not good enough stuff, and you're going to see it in him. I am the textbook case of this. I spent my first marriage, if my first husband ever hears this Zoom link or this podcast, he might laugh. I spent a lot of my first marriage after the honeymoon phase ended and after we got married, a little while later, I started project onto him that he's not good enough. We even saw a counselor. I would say it all the time. He's not doing this enough. He's not doing that enough. He's not doing that enough. And before we got married, I didn't project nearly as much, but it was stuff that was in my mind that I just didn't say out loud. And what I realized, and then I got married a second time, and then it wasn't that long into that marriage after our son was born that I found myself saying the same stuff. You're not doing this enough. You're not doing that enough. And then that's when I hit the pause button and really dived in deep. What is this? And that's when I really dived into, this is my own stuff. What I realized, and if you listened to my podcast even once before, or maybe you have or haven't, doesn't matter. As somebody who got into medical school when she was 19 years old, the voice that runs me is work harder, push harder. You got to push harder. You got to push harder. You got to push harder. Come on. Seriously, I've been like that since I was 4 years old. That's all I know. And so I had never looked at that voice. It ran me, and to some degree, it still runs me. But that voice, if I'm not looking at it consciously, I will put on everyone and everything outside of me. My secretary is enough. My patients aren't enough. My clients aren't enough. My husband's not enough. And we all do it every day, every day. And you'll have other podcasts. I'm going to put out a whole series on the patriarchy, which isn't just for men or women, it's for both. But it's understanding that a lot of that wound of I'm not good enough has deep origins. And anytime we're thinking we're not good enough, we're going to put it on anybody else. And everyone I've ever met on the planet, I've met a lot of people in the work from teaching yoga to doing this work, lives in the I'm not enough. So if this is you and you're like, God, Divi, you're right, I project my pain onto him. I'll give you another example. People who have abandonment wounds will typically see their partners as never doing enough for them. So the textbook is, if your mother didn't love you enough, or your dad didn't love you enough, or you didn't feel loved enough as a child, you were adopted or something, you'll always see that your partner can never fulfill that need. And you've read the Hallmark cards that say your partner can't fill something, but you're stuck. No matter how many times you read that Hallmark card, no matter how many times you look at the I'm not good enough stuff, you're stuck because it's in you. You do it like a knee jerk, a knee jerk, a knee jerk. You can read every self-help book out there and you're like, I don't know how to shift this, Divi. It's still in me. Still call my partner not enough. What am I doing? He doesn't give me enough. What you need to look at is, what is the wound? For me, the not good enough was performance-based. I have to really perform, take the garbage out, do enough, to meditate enough, so spiritual class enough. For somebody who's got the abandonment wound, their partner can not love them because their wound is related to their mother or father or caregivers who couldn't love them enough. So I just gave you 2 examples now. So what do? It's It's really simple. And the hard part was getting here. When you hear the remedy, you'll be like, oh, that's so simple, Divi. But it's practicing that remedy over and over and over again. The hard part is even getting to this part of the conversation. Once you identify what is in you, and I'm going to say this as if you're meditating and can sit down, but again, if you're driving, you're not going to do this closing your eyes. But I invite you to close your eyes for a minute. I invite you to drop your awareness into your heart. I invite you to visualize that in your heart, the divine I am you sits. The Christ consciousness, the fullness of who you are, the spirit of who you are, the goddess of who you are. See them inside of you. And that part of you wants to give this story up. So as you tap into your heart and you feel that story of I'm not enough, I can't trust love, whatever the story is, take it into your heart and practice some forgiveness. Maybe the very simple forgiveness prayer. Forgiveness, set me and everyone free. And see it in your heart and watch in the triangle in your heart, it dissolve. Place that thought in your heart. Forgiveness, set me and everyone free. Forgiveness, set me and everyone free. Forgiveness, set me and everyone free. And the more you repeat that, seeing that in your heart, what's actually happening is the goddess, the spirit energy, what A Course in Miracles calls the Holy Spirit, is coming and taking that away from you. And as that gets taken away from you, another energy of love is entering your heart. And it really is that simple, but it takes a lot of repetition and awareness and consciousness and the willingness to look at this. Remember, we will only experience outside of us that which is in us. That's what universal law of attraction says. I will only experience to me, what I have. So if you keep running into the I'm not good enough, you keep running into the abandonment wound, it's time to forgive it. It's time to do the spiritual work and say, I'm done with this. Let forgiveness set me free. And the cool thing about this exercise is we think as humans that we have to do the forgiveness. No, spirit does it for us. Our job is just to take it there and say, here, I need help. Let this go. And it is up to us to have the willingness to let it go. Willingness to take it there. Willingness to say, I'm done with this. Willingness to say, forgiveness set me free, and willingness to trust that. Here's the deal, guys. As somebody who's practiced this work and been in this work for a long time, I kept being riddled with the not good enough, no matter how many things I listened to, podcasts I listened to, books I read. Well, then I stumbled across this process that I was like, oh. And then for me, I can tell you it took diligence and honesty and a willingness. And the more often I do it, it's never done. The more I'm willing to do it, the more I'm willing to do it, the more I'm willing to do it. The more my husband shows up differently, where I feel differently. And if I feel differently, he shows up differently. My girlfriends show up differently. Everything shows up differently. All it takes is willingness. So as much as it's hard to be in the human body because it's hard to get here, once you dive into this and practice it diligently, it can all change. So I'm sending you so much love. I hope that helped. And don't forget, if you want some coaching and you're willing to be on the podcast, please email me at easeintoclarity@gmail.com. And we'll set up a time that works for me and works for you, that we can be on the podcast live, because there's nothing like individual coaching in a group to affect millions. So sending you lots of love. I hope this supported you even a little bit. Feel free to share this with your friends and loved ones. And here's your homework. Practice extension, practice extension, practice extension. It's a muscle. Your ego is going to jump in first, but then I want you to go, oh, let me forgive that, and practice extension. Sending you lots of love, and thank you for listening. Namaste.